On a dark, stormy afternoon when heavy rain hammered the rooftops like angry fists, the luxury community known as Silver Heights felt unusually tense, its glowing marble floors reflecting flashes of lightning as if the sky itself was warning the neighborhood that something terrible was coming. And into this world of rich people, fancy cars, overpriced chandeliers, and cold, perfect silence walked Daniel Reed, a tired single dad with messy hair, rain-soaked clothes, and a look in his eyes that immediately made the entire clubhouse freeze as he stepped through the doorway carrying a small, crumpled t-shirt in his trembling hand. A tiny shirt stained with mud, ripped on the side, with the name Aiden written inside in a child's shaky blue marker. The moment he appeared, conversations died, keys stopped clicking, even the front desk lady forgot how to breathe because standing across the room was Victoria Vale, one of the wealthiest women in the country, a billionaire who bought half the HOA just because she could, a woman who never showed fear, never cried, never bent to anyone. But today her usually cold, perfect face cracked when she heard Daniel's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Madam, your son gave me this yesterday." And those words hit harder than thunder because the entire neighborhood knew her 5-year-old son Aiden had been missing for 2 days, the police searching everywhere, the HOA acting like nothing happened, and Victoria keeping a stone cold mask while her world secretly fell apart. Now she stared at the shirt in Daniel's hand with widening eyes, her expensive bracelet trembling slightly on her wrist, her assistant stepping back in confusion because no one understood how this ordinary mechanic, this outsider who lived in a small rental house just outside the gated area, had something that belonged to her missing child. And the air grew heavy with whispers as HOA board members peeked from behind glass doors, their faces turning pale, as questions started exploding silently across the room. Why did he have the shirt? Where did he get it? Why does he look so sad? Did he see Aiden? Did he hurt him? What exactly did he mean by yesterday? Because yesterday the police declared they had no leads. Yesterday Victoria almost fainted in her private office. Yesterday the HOA security team told her there was no sign of the boy anywhere. And yet this quiet single dad stood here holding the one thing no one had been able to find. The shirt Aiden wore the night before he disappeared. Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, her voice trembling for the first time in years as she whispered, "Where did you get that?" But before she could finish, Daniel added softly, almost painfully, "Madam, there's something you need to hear, something your own security team hid from you." And the temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly as those words hit the richest woman in the community like a punch to the chest, her expression shifting from shock to fear, because she suddenly realized Daniel didn't come here to accuse her, didn't come here for praise, didn't come here for attention. He came here because he was carrying a truth heavy enough to break her. People stared at Daniel with suspicion and fear because nothing about this moment made sense. This man rarely spoke to anyone, always kept to himself, spent his days repairing cars in his small workshop, raising his son alone after his wife passed away, and never once caused trouble. So why was he here now? What did he know? Why did he look heartbroken instead of defensive? The room felt like it was holding its breath as Victoria reached out toward the shirt with shaking hands, her voice almost cracking as she whispered, "Please, tell me where you saw him." But Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with tired, sorrowful eyes, the kind of eyes that only a parent who has felt true fear could have, and said in a low, steady voice, "Aiden came to my workshop yesterday afternoon, alone, crying, scared, and begging for help," and the entire lobby gasped, people taking steps back as if lightning had struck inside the building because Aiden had been missing for 2 days. Yet Daniel was saying he saw him after the disappearance was reported, meaning the boy was alive, meaning he was running from someone, meaning someone had lied, meaning the HOA or someone inside Victoria's mansion had covered up the truth. Victoria's entire world tilted as her knees nearly buckled, her eyes filling with tears she desperately tried to hide because she never showed weakness, not even when her husband left her, not even when her businesses collapsed last year, not even when gossip magazines called her a cold mother. But now she looked like a terrified mom who would burn the world for her child, and she whispered in a trembling voice, "Yesterday? You mean, he was alive yesterday?" And Daniel nodded slowly, rainwater dripping from his coat as he held out the shirt like it was evidence from a crime scene, saying quietly, "Your son trusted me with this. He asked me to give it to you if anything happened to him." And chills ran down every spine in the room because the way Daniel said if anything happened felt like a warning, a threat, a message from a terrified child who had seen something no 5-year-old should ever witness. A few HOA board members stepped forward, their voices rising in fake authority as they accused Daniel of lying, trying to frame him, trying to manipulate the billionaire. But Daniel didn't look at them, not even once. He kept his eyes on Victoria like he was talking only to her, because she was the only parent here who understood the fear in his voice, the desperation in his posture, and the heartbreak hidden deep inside him. He spoke again, slower this time, with a quiet sadness. Aiden wasn't running from outside the neighborhood, he wasn't kidnapped from the street, he wasn't taken by a stranger. And the board members instantly tensed, their faces tightening with dread because they knew what he was about to say. But Daniel said it anyway, his voice finally breaking as he whispered, "Madam, your son was running from someone inside your own mansion." And Victoria staggered backward as if stabbed, grabbing the back of a chair to steady herself, tears spilling down her cheeks as she choked out, "No, no, that's not possible." But Daniel shook his head, his voice cracking with guilt. He told me he was scared of someone you trust, someone with access to your home, someone who could get past your cameras." And gasps echoed everywhere as people turned to each other in pure horror, while others instinctively looked at the HOA security office at the end of the hall. Some began whispering, was it the security chief? Was it one of her assistants? Was it someone on the board? Was it her business partner? But no one dared say the names out loud. Victoria covered her mouth with her hand, crying now, her makeup ruined, her expensive earrings shaking, her entire body trembling as she whispered, Why would Aiden come to you? Why didn't he come to me?" And Daniel looked down, the pain in his eyes deep enough to break anyone's heart as he whispered, "Because he said you wouldn't believe him. He said you were always too busy, and he said the person he feared was always around you." And hearing that shattered Victoria completely as she let out a quiet, broken sob, realizing for the first time in her life that her son had been suffering silently while she was buried in work, meetings, and money. The room grew painfully quiet until Daniel took a small breath and spoke. The final words that locked the entire audience into the story like a trapdoor slamming shut. "Madam, your security team found Aiden yesterday, and they hid it from you." And the shockwave of that revelation spread through the lobby like fire, assistants gasping, residents backing up, board members turning pale, and Victoria gripping the shirt against her heart as she whispered the sentence that would change everything, "Show me everything." And in that moment, right there in the wealthy, polished, perfect clubhouse, the richest woman in the HOA realized the poorest man in the room was the only one who had truly protected her child. The moment Victoria whispered, "Show me everything," the entire clubhouse changed. The marble floors that once felt warm under the golden lights suddenly felt cold, the air thick with tension. And every HOA member watching began shifting uncomfortably because they all knew one terrifying truth. If Daniel was telling the truth, someone inside their perfect rich community had betrayed the billionaire and endangered her child. And if he was lying, then the single dad standing in front of them was the most dangerous man they had ever allowed inside their gates. Before Victoria could take another step, the HOA board rushed in like a wall made of panic and arrogance, trying to shove themselves between her and Daniel, their voices rising in fake concern, each one pretending to act protective. But their eyes were full of fear, not fear for Aiden, but fear for themselves, for their secrets, for the power they might lose if Victoria discovered what they had covered up. And the board president, a bald man named Harold Pike who loved rules more than people, pointed at Daniel with trembling anger and shouted, "This man is lying. He wants attention. That's all. You cannot trust someone like him." But Daniel didn't react, didn't move, didn't even blink. He just looked at Victoria, holding the small shirt as gently as if it were glass. And in that moment she realized he wasn't acting, he wasn't pretending, he wasn't performing for the room. He was genuinely scared for her child, and that scared her more than anything. The board members surrounded him like wolves, accusing him of stealing the shirt, planting evidence, manipulating the situation, calling him a nobody, a mechanic, a poor outsider. Words meant to break him, words meant to turn Victoria against him. But Daniel simply stood there, silent, letting them spit their venom until finally he lifted his head and said in a voice so calm it cut through the chaos like a knife, "If I wanted to hurt Aiden, I would have stayed quiet." And the simple truth of that sentence made Victoria step closer to him despite every board member desperately trying to pull her back. Harold barked, "Madam, please step away. This man is dangerous." But Victoria turned, and for the first time in years, she looked at her board with pure disgust in her eyes as she coldly said, "Dangerous? He brought me my son's shirt. What have you brought me?" And silence swallowed the room because no one had an answer. The youngest board member, a nervous woman named Linda, tried to speak but her voice cracked under pressure as she stuttered, "Mrs. Vale, the security cameras showed nothing unusual." But Daniel cut her off quietly, "Because your head of security deleted the footage," and the room froze as if time itself had stopped. Harold's face drained of color as he stammered, That's a lie. Our security team would never." But Daniel pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. Old, scratched, and nearly broken, and held it up between his fingers, saying, "Backup cameras exist. Cameras your team forgot about." And the shockwave from that one sentence was so strong it felt like someone had punched the air out of the entire clubhouse, leaving only harsh breathing and terrified eyes. Victoria looked at the flash drive as if it were the key to her son's survival, her voice shaking as she whispered, You have the footage?" And Daniel nodded, though the weight of guilt pulled his shoulders down as he admitted softly, "Not all of it. The main footage was wiped clean. But I recovered pieces," and Victoria grabbed his arm, desperation flooding through her voice as she said, Show me right now, show me where my son was." But before Daniel could move, Harold lunged forward like a cornered animal, screaming, "No! That footage is illegal. It can't be shown here." And he tried to snatch the flash drive from Daniel's hand. But Daniel stepped back quickly, holding it out of reach, his calm beginning to crack as he whispered in a low, dangerous tone, "Don't touch her son's evidence." And the room inhaled sharply because Daniel, who had been quiet and gentle until now, suddenly had a fire in his voice. A father's fire, the kind that comes from protecting a child, even one that isn't his. Harold backed away, but the HOA wasn't done. They formed a circle around Daniel, blocking every exit, their fake politeness melting away to reveal their real, selfish fear, shouting things like, "He's fabricating lies. He wants money. He kidnapped the boy. He's framing us." But no matter how loudly they screamed, their voices trembled, and Victoria saw it. Saw their fear, saw their guilt, saw the truth behind their lies. She stepped forward, placing herself beside Daniel, surprising even him, and said in a powerful, shaking voice, "If any of you touch him, you will be dealing with me." And the entire board stepped back instantly because no one dared challenge a woman who owned half the HOA, a woman richer than all of them combined, a woman who looked like she was ready to burn the entire neighborhood to the ground for her son. Daniel swallowed hard, hesitating for a moment before admitting something even more terrifying. "Aiden told me he didn't trust the people around you. He said someone close to you was hurting him." And Victoria clutched her chest as her breath turned shallow, tears filling her eyes all over again because her worst fear was coming true. Her child hadn't been taken by a stranger, he had run away from someone inside her life. She whispered brokenly, Who was he afraid of?" But Daniel lowered his head, his voice cracking with guilt as he answered. He didn't say the name. He was too scared, he just said Mommy's friend, and those two words, simple, innocent, heartbreaking, landed like a bomb inside Victoria's world. Her mind raced through every person she had called a friend. Her business partner Marcus, her personal assistant Chloe, the head of HOA security Brent, her real estate attorney, even members of this very board. And the terror she felt was unlike anything she had ever experienced, not even when her companies collapsed or when her husband abandoned her. Because this time the danger wasn't money or reputation. It was her child. The HOA board grew restless, trying desperately to redirect the conversation, shouting for police, shouting for order, shouting that Daniel was lying. But Victoria ignored all of them, focusing only on Daniel as she whispered, "Why didn't you tell me yesterday? Why did you wait?" And Daniel closed his eyes, pain flooding his face as he whispered, "Because I thought I could protect him. Because he begged me not to tell anyone. Because he said he wasn't ready to face the person he feared. And because I didn't realize how deep the danger was until last night when he disappeared from my workshop." And Victoria nearly collapsed again, her entire body shaking as she grabbed the back of a couch to stabilize herself, whispering, "He disappeared from your workshop? Someone took him?" And Daniel nodded slowly, guilt crushing him as he admitted, "Someone came for him. Someone who knew he was with me. Someone who didn't want you to know the truth." And that was the moment everything changed. The exact second Victoria Vale, the billionaire who never bowed to anyone, turned her fear into fury as she pointed at the HOA board and shouted in a voice that shook the entire clubhouse, "You hid my son from me." And every board member went still, their faces white as chalk, because they knew she wasn't guessing anymore, she was certain. The moment Victoria screamed, "You hid my son from me," the entire clubhouse seemed to collapse into a suffocating silence, the kind where even breathing felt loud, and all the expensive decorations, marble pillars, golden lamps, and luxury furniture suddenly looked meaningless compared to the raw terror on a mother's face as she stared at the people she trusted. People who now stood frozen, trembling, unable to answer her. Because every single one of them knew something was wrong inside her mansion long before Daniel ever walked in with that tiny, crumpled shirt. Victoria stepped closer to Daniel, her hands shaking so much she had to grip her wrist to steady herself, her voice weak, desperate, but full of a mother's painful hope as she whispered, "Please, tell me everything, every moment, every word my son said." And Daniel looked at her with such sorrow that even the people who hated him felt their hearts tighten, because this wasn't the face of a liar. This was the face of a man carrying a weight he never asked for. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he began, "Aiden came into my workshop yesterday. It was late afternoon. I was fixing brakes on a customer's truck, and when I heard a soft knock, I thought it was my boy, Ethan. But when I opened the door, Aiden was standing there, drenched from the rain, hugging himself, shaking like he'd seen a monster, and gasps filled the room as Victoria clutched her chest, her eyes already full of tears that refused to fall because her body was too shocked to let them go. Daniel continued, his voice low but heavy. He didn't speak at first. He just pointed at the back of my workshop and whispered, "Close the door, please, close it." And when I did, he crawled behind my tool cabinet and hid like he had done it before, like he had practiced. And now even the HOA board members, those who were accusing Daniel moments earlier, began shifting uncomfortably, their fear mixing with guilt as they realized this child hadn't run randomly. He had run with a plan, a routine, a terrible habit born from repeated fear. Victoria finally whispered, her voice cracking, "Did he say why he ran? Did he say what scared him?" And Daniel nodded weakly, swallowing hard as he spoke the words that broke the entire room. "He told me. He said he left the house because someone inside your mansion scares him. Someone he says is mean when mommy isn't home. Someone he said hurts him when no one is looking." And Victoria stumbled backward with a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth as her body shook violently because she had heard those words before. Once, months ago, when Aiden came to her office crying, but she dismissed it as imagination, thinking he was just scared of shadows like most children. But now hearing it again, hearing it from Daniel, hearing it as part of her son's desperate escape made her realize she had ignored the one warning that could have saved him. Daniel's expression twisted with guilt as he continued, "He didn't tell me a name. He wouldn't say it. Every time I asked he just whispered mommy's friend. Mommy's friend, please don't make me go back." And Victoria's entire soul cracked at those words because she knew exactly which friend spent time around her son. Marcus Hale, her business partner who acted gentle around her but sharp around others. A man she trusted to manage her estate. A man who always insisted on helping with Aiden when she was busy. Her knees gave way and she sank onto a chair, covering her face with shaking hands, whispering, oh God, no, no." And Daniel took a step forward, wanting to comfort her but unsure if he had the right. Until Victoria looked up, mascara smeared, tears falling freely now, and whispered in a broken voice, "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he come to me?" And Daniel lowered his head, his voice trembling as he answered, "Because he didn't think you would believe him. He said every time he tried to talk to you, the person he feared was in the room, watching him, smiling at you. And he said you were too busy, too stressed, too tired. He told me he didn't want to cause trouble because he thought you wouldn't listen." And Victoria let out the most painful cry the neighborhood had ever heard, a sound that came not from her throat but from her soul, the kind of cry that only a mother who realizes her child was suffering right under her nose can make. The HOA board stood frozen, unable to move as the truth unraveled, and Daniel continued, voice now thick with regret as he confessed, "I let him stay. I gave him a blanket. I made him warm food. I tried to get him to tell me everything but he just kept saying he needed time. He said, 'Tomorrow I will tell you the name. Tomorrow I will tell you what he did.' But I didn't know tomorrow wouldn't come." And Victoria looked up sharply, her eyes wide with fresh terror. "What do you mean tomorrow didn't come?" And Daniel's voice shattered as he whispered. When I went to check on him the next morning, he was gone, taken. Someone came for him at night. Someone who knew exactly where he was. Someone who didn't want anyone to know who he feared. And the room erupted into frantic whispers and gasps as Victoria's entire world collapsed in front of her eyes. She stumbled toward Daniel, grabbing his jacket with trembling hands as she cried, "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call the police?" And Daniel broke at that moment, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Because he begged me not to. Because he was terrified. Because he said if I called anyone, they would punish him. Because he thought telling me would make things worse." And Victoria's heart shattered further because she realized her child didn't just run. He ran to the only person he trusted, a stranger, a mechanic, a single dad, a man the HOA looked down on. Because her own home wasn't safe. She whispered, barely breathing, "Daniel, who took him?" And Daniel shook his head helplessly, tears finally clinging to his lashes as he whispered, "I don't know. But whoever took him, they knew him. They comforted him. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He left willingly because he recognized the voice." And Victoria collapsed into the nearest chair again, her entire body trembling violently as she whispered over and over, "My baby, my baby." He trusted the wrong person. And even those who disliked her felt their hearts ache. Daniel took a slow breath and delivered the final truth that cracked the entire neighborhood into pieces. "Madam, someone close to you hurt your son. Someone inside your mansion lied. Someone deleted the footage. Someone found him before you did. And if we don't find out who, Aiden won't come home." And as lightning flashed outside the glass windows, illuminating Victoria's tear-stained face, her expression hardened, not with hopelessness, but with rage, because now she understood the truth. Her son didn't disappear. He was taken by someone she trusted. The moment Daniel finished his heartbreaking confession, the entire clubhouse became a pressure cooker of fear and guilt, the air so heavy it felt like the walls were closing in. And before Victoria could even process the pain, the HOA board suddenly exploded into a frenzy, their voices rising in panic, their faces turning pale as if someone had ripped the mask off their perfect neighborhood and exposed the rot underneath. Harold Pike, the board president who always pretended to have authority, stepped forward sweating, his voice shaky but loud as he shouted, "This is nonsense. This man is manipulating you. That footage is illegal. It cannot be used." But even his attempt at confidence cracked in the middle, because he knew everyone knew. This wasn't about legality. This was about the truth they were desperate to hide. Victoria slowly turned toward him, her eyes red, swollen, and full of a cold rage no one had ever seen from her before, and she whispered in a deadly calm voice, "Illegal? My child is missing, and you're worried about rules?" And Harold flinched so hard he stepped back, bumping into a glass table, nearly knocking it over as Linda, the board's youngest member, began trembling violently, her voice breaking as she forced a smile and said, "Mrs. Vale, please. You must understand. The security footage is incomplete. It doesn't show anything important." But Daniel cut her off coldly, pulling the small, scratched flash drive from his pocket like a weapon forged from truth, saying, "You mean the footage Brent deleted? The footage your team pretended didn't exist? The footage I found by accident because your security system wasn't as smart as you thought?" And Linda's face drained of every drop of color as she stumbled backward, her breathing fast, shaky, eyes darting around like a trapped animal, while Harold rushed forward again, screaming, "He's lying. He must have faked the footage. He must have planted it." And he tried to snatch the drive again, but Daniel moved first, stepping back and raising his arm protectively, his voice low and dangerous as he warned, "Touch me again, and you'll regret it." And the calm, fierce look in Daniel's eyes made even the security guards freeze because there was something about the way he stood, tired, furious, protective, that made him look twice as powerful as the entire HOA board combined. Victoria grabbed Daniel's arm, not out of fear, but out of desperation, whispering, "Show me, please, show me what they hid from me." And her voice was so broken, so desperate, so raw, that even the board members who disliked her felt a pang of guilt. But Harold panicked more, sweating through his shirt as he shouted towards security, "Stop him. Don't let him play that footage." And in that second, the entire room understood the truth. If Harold was innocent, he would want the footage shown. But the fact that he was terrified of it meant he knew exactly what it contained. The two security guards hesitated, looking between Harold's frantic orders and Victoria's tear-filled eyes, and after a tense pause that felt like the world had stopped spinning, Victoria snapped in a voice sharp enough to break stone. "If you lay one finger on him, you are fired, arrested, and removed from this community forever." And the guards instantly stepped back, lowering their hands, choosing the billionaire over the trembling board president without a second thought. Harold looked around wildly, realizing he was losing control, and in a desperate attempt to save himself, he stuttered, "Mrs. Vale, please, listen. This footage is being twisted," the child probably wondered. But Victoria stepped toward him slowly, each step heavy, trembling with pain and fury, and she whispered, "You told me my son was not seen anywhere. You told me the cameras showed nothing. You told me to stop worrying. You lied," and Harold's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but nothing came out, because Victoria's stare alone crushed every excuse he wanted to give. Suddenly Daniel spoke again, his voice softer now but filled with sorrow that made everyone fall silent. "Your son was scared. He said someone close to you hurt him. Someone who knew the cameras. Someone who knew your schedule. Someone who could come in and out of your house without raising suspicion." And those words sliced through the room like knives as every board member subtly stepped away from Harold, from each other, each of them terrified they might be accused next, each of them wondering which one of them was involved, or if it was someone even higher, someone with more power, someone like Marcus Hale, who handled Victoria's estate finances and often walked around like he owned her mansion. Victoria clutched the shirt Daniel had brought, pressing it to her chest so tightly it wrinkled in her hands, and her voice broke completely as she whispered, "I trusted all of you. I trusted my staff. I trusted my friends," and tears streamed down her face as she whispered the sentence that felt like a knife to her own heart. "But my son trusted a stranger more than me." And Daniel looked away painfully, because that truth hurt him too. Harold tried one last time to stop everything, screaming, "No! You cannot trust this man. He has no proof," and Daniel quietly said, "I do." And with those two words, the room fell silent, the storm outside grew louder, and every eye turned toward the tiny flash drive glowing dimly in Daniel's hand like a few seconds before detonation. Victoria stepped toward the clubhouse projector, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Give it to me." And Daniel placed the drive in her palm with such gentle care that her breath hitched, and as she raised her shaking fingers toward the screen, Harold screamed, "No," and lunged forward, only for Daniel to shove him back with a force that sent the board president stumbling into a chair. Victoria inserted the drive, the projector blinked, the screen lit up, and in the reflection of that glowing screen, the truth was finally about to come out, and everyone in the room knew life in Silver Heights would never be the same again. The moment the projector flickered to life, every person in the clubhouse held their breath, the storm outside raging harder as if the sky itself wanted to witness the truth. The first grainy clip appeared, a shaky black and white recording from a forgotten maintenance camera that no one even remembered existed, showing the back alley behind Daniel's workshop, and at first, the footage looked empty, just rain falling, shadows moving, trash cans shaking from the wind, until a tiny figure sprinted into view, soaked, crying, stumbling, and the room collectively gasped as little Aiden Vale appeared on the screen, hugging himself tightly, flinching at every sound, his small shoes splashing through puddles as he desperately looked over his shoulder like someone had chased him all the way there. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth, a broken sound escaping her throat as a child she thought was lost, ran into her life on the screen, terrified, alone, trembling with fear no 5-year-old should ever know. The footage showed Aiden knocking on Daniel's workshop door with trembling fingers, looking over his shoulder again and again before whispering something the camera barely picked up, "Please, open, please." And when the door opened and Daniel appeared, wearing grease-stained clothes and confusion on his face, Aiden practically collapsed into his arms, clutching his shirt with tiny fists, burying his face in Daniel's chest like he had finally reached safety, and the entire room fell silent as tears streamed down Victoria's cheeks. The sight of her son choosing a stranger instead of his own home crushed her heart into dust. Daniel was shown lifting Aiden gently, holding him like he had been holding scared children his whole life, not panicking, not scolding, not judging, just comforting him with steady hands and a soft voice that even the camera could feel. He carried Aiden inside, closing the door behind them, and the next clip appeared, the workshop's small back room camera, showing Aiden wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm soup Daniel had made, his eyes red and swollen. As he whispered words that stabbed everyone watching, "I don't want to go back." He gets angry. He gets so angry when Mommy is not home. And Victoria collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking uncontrollably as she cried, "My baby! What did he go through? Who hurt my baby?" And no one, absolutely no one, could look her in the eyes because they all felt guilty, ashamed, responsible for ignoring the signs. Aiden continued whispering in the footage, "Please don't tell Mommy. He said she won't believe me. He said Mommy likes him more. He said she'll be mad at me." And Victoria screamed into her hands, the room trembling with her grief, because she finally realized the truth she had tried to deny. Someone she trusted deeply had made her son believe she wouldn't protect him. Everyone in the clubhouse watched with frozen horror as the footage shifted to the next clip. Aiden sleeping on a small cot Daniel had set up. Daniel sitting on the floor beside him like a silent guardian, watching over him all night. Exhaustion heavy on his face but determination keeping him awake. Then the moment came that shattered the room completely. Around 3 a.m., the workshop door in the footage cracked open slowly. Silently, without force, without breaking, someone who had a key walked in, someone Aiden recognized, someone he trusted enough not to scream. A tall shadow moved into the room, face outside the camera's angle, approaching the child with slow, careful steps, and Aiden sat up instantly, rubbing his eyes, whispering, "You came." And that one sentence made the whole room inhale sharply because he wasn't afraid. He was resigned, like this had happened before, like being taken in the night was normal. Daniel woke up a second too late in the footage. Jumping to his feet, shouting stop. But the figure grabbed Aiden's hand and whispered something that made him leave willingly, obediently, like a child following a familiar voice, and before Daniel could reach them, the figure rushed out the door with Aiden in tow. The camera caught only a slivered reflection from the rain-soaked window, a neat suit sleeve, a gold watch, expensive shoes, nothing more, but it was enough to send shockwaves through the room. Victoria's assistants glanced at each other, horrified, because everyone recognized that gold watch. Everyone knew only one man in Silver Heights wore that exact model. Everyone knew which friend had access to her home, her schedule, her staff, and her trust. Victoria stared at the blurred reflection, her voice trembling violently as she whispered, "No, no, please don't let it be him." But deep inside she knew the truth. Her business partner Marcus Hale, the man she trusted with her finances, her estate, her secrets, and her child's safety, was the only one who fit the blurry outline, the only one who wore that watch, the only one with full access to her mansion, the only one Aiden would follow without crying. The footage ended abruptly, the screen going black, leaving the room drowned in suffocating silence as Victoria finally broke down completely, sobbing into her hands while Daniel stood beside her, guilt etched into his face because he truly tried, to protect Aiden but failed, and the weight of that failure sat on him like a mountain. The HOA board stood frozen, terrified not of Daniel, but of the truth, because they had protected the wrong man, defended the wrong man, trusted the wrong man, and now a child had paid the price. Victoria lifted her head slowly, her eyes red, swollen, filled with a rage so powerful the entire room took a step back as she whispered, "Marcus, he took my son. He did this, and all of you helped him hide it." And no one dared breathe as she stood up, her voice turning cold as ice. "He hurt my child, and I swear on everything I have, I will burn this entire neighborhood to the ground before I let him escape." The moment Victoria whispered Marcus's name, the entire clubhouse seemed to tilt, as if the storm outside had finally broken inside the building, and before anyone could recover, Harold Pike lunged toward the projector, ripping the flash drive out with trembling hands and shouting, "This footage proves nothing. Marcus is a respected man. You can't accuse him based on a shadow." But his voice cracked with fear, exposing the truth. Harold wasn't defending Marcus because he believed in him. He was defending him because he was terrified of what would happen if Victoria discovered how deep their lies went. Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking like hammers against the marble as she said in a deadly whisper, "You protected him. You protected the man who took my child." And Harold stumbled backward, shaking his head, trying to deny everything. But Daniel stepped in front of him, blocking him with a look so fierce the entire room froze as he said, "Stop lying. You knew. You all knew," and the board members stiffened, guilt written across every face. Linda broke first, tears spilling as she whispered, We didn't know he took the boy. We only knew the deleted footage. Marcus told us it was a system glitch. He said we shouldn't worry Victoria. He said he would handle everything. And as she spoke, Victoria's heart shattered all over again. Marcus had convinced her staff to hide signs, hide fears, hide truths, all while walking freely through her home, acting like a trusted friend. Rage burned inside her like fire seeking oxygen. But before Victoria could speak, the clubhouse doors flew open and HOA security guards stormed inside under Harold's frantic instructions, surrounding Daniel with batons drawn, shouting, "Hand over the drive. Hand over the evidence. You're under investigation." And Daniel's eyes widened, not with fear for himself, but with fear for Aiden, because if Harold and his corrupt board got their hands on the footage, they would bury it forever, protecting Marcus and leaving Aiden alone in danger. Daniel stepped back instinctively, shielding the backpack where he kept the backup drive, and shouted, "I'm not giving anything to you. You people covered this up." But the guards moved closer, circling him like predators sensing weakness. Victoria jumped in front of Daniel, screaming, "Stop! Get away from him!" But Harold yelled over her, "He's interfering with an HOA investigation. He needs to be detained." And the guards hesitated, torn between the billionaire's power and Harold's orders, until Harold added the one sentence they couldn't ignore. "He is the prime suspect in the child's disappearance." And the room erupted into chaos as people gasped, whispering, shaking their heads because the footage clearly proved Daniel tried to protect Aiden, not hurt him. Daniel clenched his fists, whispering, "You cowards, you're trying to pin this on me so Marcus gets away." And Harold barked, "Take him now," and the guards surged forward. But Daniel moved first, with the speed of a desperate father. He grabbed Victoria's laptop from the table, flipped it open, connected the backup flash drive hidden in his pocket, and without a second's hesitation, pressed the Go Live button. Instantly, every screen in the neighborhood, from smart TVs, HOA panels, front gates, security monitors, phones, even the clubhouse televisions, began streaming the recovered footage in real time. Aiden running, crying, hiding, the shadow taking him, the watch gleaming, Daniel chasing after them, everything visible to every resident, every neighbor, every homeowner at the exact same moment. The clubhouse exploded in screams, alarms blared as phones vibrated across the entire community, and Harold's face drained of all color as he shrieked, "Turn it off. Turn it off now." But it was too late. Thousands of people were already watching the truth unfold. Neighbors rushed out of their houses, some crying, some shouting, some calling 911, others calling for HOA resignations, and in the clubhouse, the guards froze, lowering their batons in shock as Harold's last defense crumbled. Victoria stared at Daniel like she was seeing him for the first time, not as a stranger, not as a mechanic, not as a poor outsider, but as the man who had just risked every ounce of safety, reputation, and freedom to expose the truth for her son. She stepped toward him with trembling gratitude, whispering, "Daniel, where is my son? Where did you hide him that night?" And Daniel, breathing hard, sweat running down his face, guilt heavy in his voice, whispered, "Somewhere safe. A place only I know. A place no one in this neighborhood could reach." And Victoria grabbed his arms, tears streaming again as she demanded, "Take me to him. Take me to him right now." But Daniel hesitated, his voice breaking as he confessed something that made the entire room go still. "I tried to keep him safe. I swear I did. But that night, when they came for him, he was already gone before I woke up. I found his little shoes on the floor, but the door was open. Someone carried him away." And Victoria stumbled back, her heart nearly stopping as she whispered, No, he's still missing?" And Daniel nodded painfully but quickly added, "I tracked something important, a clue. I found out where they might have taken him." And the room inhaled sharply as he reached into his jacket and held up a small metallic tag, a security pass from Victoria's own mansion, with Marcus Hale's initials engraved on it, smeared with rain and dirt. Daniel's voice hardened as he said, "He dropped this outside my workshop, the night he took Aiden." And Victoria's fear turned into pure, unstoppable fury as she whispered, "Then we're going to get my son back. Tonight." The moment Daniel held up the metallic tag with Marcus's initials on it, the entire clubhouse fell into a dead, suffocating silence, the kind that squeezes the air out of every lung, and Victoria stared at the tag like it was a weapon aimed directly at her heart, because the realization hit her like a physical blow. Marcus didn't just betray her trust, he had walked through her home like a friend, touched her son's toys, sat at her dinner table, and then quietly waited for the right moment to steal her child away. The HOA board stood frozen, some in shock, some in shame, some in silent fear of what Victoria would do next. But none dared breathe as she slowly stepped toward Daniel, her expensive heels clicking like gunshots against the marble, her voice cracking but sharp enough to cut through steel as she whispered, "Where is my son?" And Daniel, exhausted, guilt-ridden, but determined, swallowed hard before saying, "There's only one place Marcus could take him. A place no police would search. A place only someone like him would use." And he pulled out a folded map from his jacket, spreading it shakily on the nearest table. The map showed a forgotten rental cabin outside the HOA, a remote structure surrounded by woods, the kind of place where no cameras existed. No neighbors could hear cries, no one would even know. A child was inside, and Victoria felt her knees weaken as she whispered, That's where my nanny used to take Aiden for summer picnics." Marcus knew that, he knew Aiden felt safe there, and the betrayal cut deeper because Marcus hadn't dragged the child somewhere terrifying. He had lured him somewhere familiar, somewhere the boy wouldn't be afraid to enter. Before Harold or any board member could protest, Victoria snatched the map from Daniel's hand, wiping her tears as she commanded, "We're going. Now. All of you stay out of my way," and turned toward the door with a fury that shook the walls, her assistant scrambling behind her. But Daniel grabbed her wrist gently, stopping her just long enough to say, "He trusts me. Let me come with you." And without hesitation, she nodded, whispering, "You are the only person he trusted. Don't leave him now." And those words stunned everyone, because the richest woman in the community, a woman who never let anyone inside her life, was now relying on the poorest man in the room. They rushed outside into the storm, Victoria climbing into Daniel's old truck instead of her luxury car, not caring about mud, not caring about appearances, only whispering Aiden's name like a prayer as Daniel drove faster than he ever had, the wipers fighting the rain while fear clawed inside both their chests. Meanwhile, back in the clubhouse, the HOA board crumbled into chaos as neighbors flooded inside, screaming at them for covering up evidence, threatening resignations, demanding police intervention, and Harold was dragged aside by furious residents as people shouted, "You protected the wrong man. You almost let a child die. You're finished." And for the first time, Harold realized his kingdom of fake power had collapsed, and there was nothing left but consequences. But miles away, Daniel's truck skidded onto the muddy path leading to the old cabin, its weak headlights barely slicing through the storm, and Victoria pressed her hands to the dashboard, whispering, "Please be okay. Please be okay. Please be okay." Until finally the cabin came into view, a small, broken structure with one dim light shining from inside like a weak heartbeat in the dark. Daniel parked and jumped out first, motioning Victoria to stay behind him. But she didn't listen, running through the rain toward the door, screaming, "Aiden!" And Daniel rushed after her, pushing open the cabin door with his shoulder, only to freeze when they saw the scene inside. Little Aiden sat on an old couch, wrapped in a blanket, his tiny legs tucked against his chest, tears dried on his face, but safe in every way that mattered. And the moment he saw his mother, he leaped up and ran into her arms, crying, "Mommy, I knew you'd come." And Victoria fell to her knees, holding him so tightly it looked like she would never let go again, tears mixing with rainwater as she sobbed into his hair, repeating, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have protected you." And Aiden, still trembling, whispered, "He said you'd be mad. He said you'd send me back." And Victoria shook her head so violently it nearly broke her neck as she cried, "Never, never again. No one will ever hurt you again." And Daniel stood back silently, relief washing over him like warm sunlight after a storm. Suddenly, Aiden turned and pointed at Daniel with a trembling smile, saying, "Daddy saved me." And both adults froze, Victoria shocked, Daniel speechless. As Aiden added softly, "He stayed with me. He kept me safe. He is my hero." And Victoria looked at Daniel with a softness and gratitude so deep it made his heart ache, whispering, "Daniel, thank you. You didn't just protect my son. You protected my world." And for the first time, she reached out and took his hand with her free one, squeezing it as tears fell from her eyes. Within minutes, police sirens echoed through the woods, officers arriving to arrest Marcus at the back of the cabin where he tried to escape, handcuffed and screaming excuses no one believed anymore. While Victoria, kneeling on the cabin floor, whispered to Daniel, "You are not leaving our lives. Not now, not ever," and Daniel, overwhelmed, simply nodded, knowing Aiden's small hand clinging to his shirt meant more than any apology, any reward, any title. And as the storm finally began to break, and the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the single dad who walked into a clubhouse with a torn t-shirt walked out of the cabin with something far more powerful. A new family who trusted him, and a child who already saw him as a father.